Warning: the following story contains descriptions of graphic violence. Viewer discretion is advised. Welcome back to Sleeper Cell 41. In today's episode, we're diving into the story of Patrick Wayne Kearney, known as the Trash Bag Killer. Kearney was a notorious serial killer who terrorized California in the 1970s. Join me as we explore the chilling details of his crimes, the investigation that led to his capture, and the impact he had on the community. This is the case of Patrick Wayne Kearney. Patrick Kearney was born on September 24, 1939, as the oldest of three sons and was raised in a reasonably stable family of middle-class background. As a thin and sickly child, he was often a target for bullies at school, who beat him up frequently and berated him as a, quote, queer, despite his supposed interest in girls. In his teens, he became withdrawn and harbored fantasies about killing personal enemies, often ending in Kearney skinning them alive. In addition, he developed sexual fantasies revolving around domination and began engaging in bestiality when he was 13. Born in East Los Angeles, California, Kearney also lived in Texas. He returned to California following a brief marriage that ended in divorce, and eventually worked as an engineer for Hughes Aircraft. It was from his experiences in his early years in California that Kearney cultivated his skill as a gay pickup artist. Kearney mostly sought out partners in San Diego and Tijuana, Mexico, where he used his fluency in Spanish and keen interest in Latin American culture as a basis to connect with potential partners. Kearney claimed to have killed his first victim, a hitchhiker he picked up and murdered in Orange, California, around 1962. He claimed several more victims, mostly transients, before moving to Redondo Beach near Los Angeles in 1967 with a man named David Hill, who became his lover. As time passed, Hill and Kearney began to argue more often, and Kearney would go out for long solitary drives in his Volkswagen Beetle or his truck. He would then pick up and kill young male hitchhikers or young men from gay bars. Kearney was a necrophile and was generally consistent in the manner in which he murdered his victims and disposed of their remains. Being of slight build, Kearney was unable to physically overpower his victims and used a gun to kill them. He was not sadistic and did not inflict pain on his victims as the other two freeway killers did, preferring quickness and efficiency, while Kearney did later confess to having mutilated his victims' bodies out of curiosity, such as cutting open one of their stomachs. He did so post-mortem and did not inflict any physical suffering. Kearney confessed to having committed his first murder in the spring of 1962. The victim's name is unknown, but he was confirmed to be age 19 and white. Kearney had convinced the male to take a ride on his motorcycle with him to a secluded area outside of Indio, California. When they arrived, Kearney shot the man in the head and sexually assaulted the body. It is unknown if the body was ever found, but Kearney did indeed confess to committing this murder and two additional ones during 1962. The second victim was the younger cousin of Kearney's first victim, who had witnessed Kearney drive away with the victim. The first murder that Kearney confessed to and was convicted of occurred sometime around Christmas of 1968 while he was living in Culver City, approximately 1 year after he and David Hill had taken residence together. The murder took place inside his Van Buren Avenue residence. According to Kearney, this victim, whose name is known as George, was lured into his vehicle in San Diego and taken to his home, then shot in the head moments after entering the house. The victim was then dragged to his bathroom, where he was sodomized, then skinned and dismembered in the bathtub with an X-Acto knife. Kearney also extracted the bullet from the victim's head to ensure the murder would not be traced to him. He then buried the dismembered body behind his garage. Kearney did not kill for over a year following this murder, primarily out of fear that law enforcement would inquire about the disappearance of George. Years later, the identity of this victim has yet to have been discovered, besides his first name. As time passed, Kearney greatly refined his MO, which enabled him to carry out his crimes much more efficiently and frequently. Starting in 1974, Kearney is estimated to have committed murders on an almost monthly basis. After picking up his victims along the freeway or at gay bars in his Volkswagen or in his truck, Kearney would typically shoot his victims in a temple above the ear with a Derringer .22 caliber pistol in his right hand, while steering his car with his left hand and simultaneously monitoring the car's speed to avoid exhibiting any unusual behavior to potential witnesses. After murdering his victims, Kearney would leave the bodies slumped upright in the passenger seat and drive to a secluded area to sexually violate them. After copulating with his victims' corpses, Kearney would usually mutilate and dismember the remains with a hacksaw before disposing of them in various locations, such as canyons, landfills, and along the freeways, usually in industrial trash bags. In some cases, Kearney disposed of the bodies in the desert, where they could be consumed by carrion-eating animals. Kearney would sometimes drain the victim's blood to eliminate odor, and would also sometimes bathe the body parts prior to disposal to minimize the presence of dried blood and eliminate fingerprint evidence. Sometimes Kearney would beat his victims after they were dead. He perceived beating his dead victims as a cathartic exercise and a means by which he could effectively vent suppressed anger and acquire a sense of power. Often, the victims resembled people who had bullied him in his childhood. Although Kearney primarily preyed on young men, there were known child and adolescent victims as well. Kearney's youngest victim was Rondell Lean Smith, age 5, who disappeared in Lenox, California on August 24, 1974. His body was discovered in Riverside County on October 12, 1974. Merle Hondo Chance, age 8, of Venice, vanished on April 6, 1977, while supposedly riding his bicycle in the vicinity of Kearney's place of work. Kearney claims to have smothered the boy, taken his body home overnight, and later disposed of the remains in the Angeles National Forest off Angeles Crest Highway, approximately 11 miles north of Altadena. Chance's decomposed remains were discovered on May 26, 1977. Merle Chance was Kearney's last known victim. On June 16, 1976, Kearney killed Michael Craig McGee, age 13, of Redondo Beach. Records confirmed that McGee had a lengthy history of juvenile delinquency. Kearney claimed to have picked up McGee, who was hitchhiking from Inglewood Avenue near Lenox to Torrance. According to the police, Kearney had befriended the boy and invited him to attend a camping trip to Lake Elsinore over the course of the weekend. Kearney claimed to have perceived McGee as a potential threat and shot him without warning after McGee openly boasted of his criminal exploits and inquired about the presence and location of burglar alarms in Kearney's home. Later, when interviewed by detectives, Kearney implied that he had destroyed the remains, stating, "I disposed of the body. You aren't going to find him." The victim who ultimately led to Kearney's arrest was John Otis LeMay, age 17, whom he killed on Sunday, March 13, 1977. At approximately 5:30 p.m. on that same day, LeMay had told a neighbor that he was going to Redondo Beach to meet a man named Dave, whom he had met at a local gym. This was in fact David Hill, who had given LeMay the address to Kearney's home. Hill was absent when LeMay arrived, so Kearney invited him in to watch television until Hill returned. Without provocation, Kearney impulsively reached for his pistol and shot LeMay in the back of the head. Kearney later dismembered the corpse and dumped the remains in the desert. When his killing spree was at its zenith, Kearney's odd tendencies went largely undetected. A local grocery store owner named Jerry Stevens did, however, note that Kearney frequently purchased butcher knives after examining them and inquiring about the quality of the steel. Stevens also described Kearney as a loner with an eerie sense of quiet about him. Kearney's supervisor at Hughes Aircraft referred to him as a model worker. LeMay's remains were found on March 18, 1977. Police had actually been to Kearney's home for the LeMay investigation prior to Chance's kidnapping and murder. The police soon discovered that LeMay had been seen in the company of Kearney and Hill. Warrants were issued for the arrest of Kearney and Hill on June 3rd. Kearney resigned from his job, and the two fled to El Paso, Texas. The fugitives' families persuaded the pair to turn themselves in. Kearney surrendered at Riverside County Sheriff's Office on July 1st, 1977, along with Hill. David Hill, 36 years old at the time, was eventually cleared of any involvement in Kearney's crimes and was released. Kearney made a full confession, initially admitting to a total of 28 murders and subsequently to 7 more. In order to avoid a death sentence, he agreed to plead guilty. Kearney was charged with 21 counts of murder and, as agreed, pleaded guilty. He was given 21 life sentences. Police are certain that Kearney was responsible for the other 7 murders he had admitted to, but lacked the physical evidence to charge him. As of 2022, Kearney is incarcerated at California's Mule Creek State Prison. For more content, like, share, subscribe, and hit the notification bell. Thank you.